think we're going to bring in Amanda and have a little conversation with her.
All right, Amanda, here you go. You have the floor.
Hello. So yeah, about this Charter of Rights and Freedom. It sounds
Yeah.
really good. Like, I think it sounds amazing, their Charter of Rights. Can you explain why you don't think? It's like I really think that I have a lot of protection.
Well, I actually agree with you. It does sound nice. That's the thing, right? Like, it wouldn't be able to trick you if it didn't sound nice.
Oh yeah.
So, but it doesn't really take much to see the deceit. It's not. I had a fantastic conversation with somebody today, and about this exact conversation, and they were trying to counter my point, and their counter was, "Dude, I'm literally a law student." Because I was bringing up very specific sections of the charter, which we'll get into, right? And so they said, "Dude, I'm literally a law student," to which I referenced a couple of other sections just to see if I could pique their interest. And their response to that was, "Dude, I literally just took a class called Constitutional Law." So now I'm rethinking all of the information and all of my research, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not like I'm not making a claim that the document doesn't exist, right? It's there on paper, but so is the thesis I wrote for college 4 years ago. That doesn't mean it applies to anybody. It doesn't mean it holds any legal value. So I've got friends who think they're protected by a charter of rights and freedoms. I'm sure you've got friends who assume that when they see things happening on TV that their charter has somehow been infringed upon, or my rights are being denied or violated. So the first thing I like to do is ask people if they're familiar with the process of buying a house. And I know it sounds like a weird question, but it does have a purpose, I promise you. If you're familiar with buying a house, generally speaking, the path you take is to go to a bank and request that they financially back you, because not many people have a couple of $100,000 in cash that they can buy a house with. And even if they do, most people would still prefer to finance it to get a better credit rating. Yeah. So you're going to want to make an offer on this new house. So you go to this person and you say, "Hey, you're selling this house. I love it. I want to make an offer." But that offer is going to be subject to something, at least one thing. It's going to be subject to your financing. It may be some other things too. It may say, "Yeah, I need you to fix the roof before I buy it," and maybe take 10,000 off the price and all that. But at the end of the day, it's subject to one main thing. It's your financing. So a subject has been put on that contract now, because that's what it is. You're signing a piece of paper with an offer and sending it to someone, and they're going to sign it and accept it or counter it or decline it. So that's what a contract is.
Yeah.
So if you put it, it's subject to financing. But so if the bank decides they're not going to give you the money, that contract can't go through, no matter how much you want to buy that house. And no matter how much that person wants to sell you that house, you can't do it now. You don't have money.
Yeah.
So a subject has to be satisfied. That is legal contract 101. If there's a subject, it has to be satisfied before the contract takes force. So, Michael, why am I talking about subjects on a contract?
Well, I think you're referring to certain sections as you're talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And one of the sections, and I'll let you mention it, refers to certain subject matter being satisfied. So from there, you can explain it, Shane.
Well, the Constitution Act is our BNA Act and our Charter of Rights. So to bring in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Queen had to give a proclamation, and her proclamation was a subject, as you said, Nikki. Section 59. And I'd love for inquiring minds who are watching this, anybody in the comment section, or If you know any politically inclined people in your life, this is a great question to ask them. Start off with the preface of the legal contract and what a subject is, and make sure they understand and accept that. And then read to them section 59 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Sorry, start with 58, because that's the introduction that lets you know it's a subject. So section 58 reads, subject to section 59, this act shall come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General. So right there it tells you there's a subject, and when it's satisfied is when this act can come into force. So immediately you know, until section 59 is satisfied, this charter means nothing. It's a hypothetical piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then section 59 is what the subject actually is. So in our buying a house metaphor, it's subject to your financing. Now we got to find out what the financing is. How much money are you asking for? How much interest rate? All the meat of it. So section 59 tells you that section 23 1A of the charter has to be specifically signed off and agreed upon by Quebec's legislature, specifically Quebec's. And it says 23, so section 23, subsection 1, subsection A. That section needs to be satisfied. It needs to be fully accepted, agreed upon, and voted in Quebec's provincial legislature. That's what our subject is. So what is section 23.1A? That's what needs to be satisfied. That's the subject. Basically, it says that Quebec has to allow for grade school education in both English and French to anybody in their province. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to do that, because most of Quebec does that, right? But they don't want to be legally tied down to having to do that by an external force. Quebec is a sovereign nation, and they know it. They didn't sign this charter. They hold power. For people who want to look into it, we can figure it out. We've done many streams on it. We'll do more for sure. But Quebec knows the power they hold, right? So they didn't sign off on this charter, and they knew damn well that meant it doesn't come into force. The specific wording of that, by the way, is for 23.1a, any citizen of Canada whose first language learned and still understood is that of the English or French linguistic minority population of the province in which they reside, they have the right to have their children receive primary and secondary school instruction in that language in that province. So that's what it means. If I'm an Anglophone family and I live in Quebec and I have offspring and I send them to school, Quebec is forced legally to make sure my child gets English education. And like I said, it's not that they don't necessarily do this, but they don't want to be forced, legally bound to do it, right? Especially not by another nation telling it to do it, right?
Yeah. So
they respect their sovereignty. So that's the big... go ahead, Nikki.
So now that you said that, I have two there, and Amanda will like this. You mentioned charter, and what do you charter, Shane, if you may?
I charter a private jet to take me down south on a beach and drink mojitos.
What else could you charter, Shane?
You could take a business and charter it and incorporate it and set out the structure to govern its employees by using a charter.
So,
wait, did I say with a charter? That sounds weird. I thought we were talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms here.
So knowing that, and we'll get back to that, but let's move on, because people talk about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I always like to state a number, and I will, and I'll want you to explain it to anybody watching. Section 32, Shane, if you will, please. It's a favorite one of mine.
Is it sad that we have favorite sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Oh.
So, section 32. This is fantastic stuff, really. So, we've already figured out that there's a subject preventing the charter from taking force, right? But here in Dreamland in Canada Incorporated in 2020, we're still pretending like the charter exists. And there's actually a Supreme Court decision that acknowledges the fact that the charter hasn't taken legal force, but through consent of the population, we're operating as if it does. So that's fantastic on its own. So let's assume now that the charter is in force, right? And now we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we're going to ignore what we just talked about how it's meant to incorporate a company. We'll get back to that in a second. But Nikki said section 32, which is the application section, right? So you find out who the charter applies to. And it's a really, really short section. It's one of my favorites. Nikki, it can be your favorite too, but I'm claiming it as one of my favorites. This charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respect of all matters within the authority of Parliament, including all matters relating to the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories, and to the legislature and government of each province in respect of all matters within the authority of the legislature of each province.
So now that you're saying that, I have a question for you. So would that let's say, apply to a private citizen?
Well, you can make that argument, right? I've had people say, well, no, what this means is that the charter, or this means the government is bound by it, and that people aren't, right? Which I thought, okay, that could be a valid argument. So I went down and went to the government's website, because that's my favorite place to do research. I like to use their documents against them. And they have a page on their website where they lay out the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And they have each section and a layman's explanation of what it means, and breaks it down for you. So obviously I had to find out, what does the government say about the application section of their charter? Because in my head, I thought to myself, they're probably going to have some weird wording that doesn't really give it the right. No. Underneath section 32 on the government's website, .gc.ca, this section of the charter is meant to clarify that this charter applies only to government officials, whether hired or appointed, and not to private citizens or businesses.
That's just wonderful. I think it lays it out pretty clear there.
Well, that's about as clear as the Clarity Act, wouldn't you say, Nikki?
Well, the Clarity Act is something else coming up. But people, I think, and I can't remember exactly, Shane, and maybe you will, talk about Section 2 and I think Section 34, right? With restricting your rights. So how can they restrict your rights if it applies to the Parliament and their employees?
Well, here's an interesting twist on that. The charter only applies to government officials, but the public health orders for COVID-19 do not apply to government officials.
That is fantastic. I love that.
And government officials and government spokespeople are on camera admitting this. They're not trying to, that's not some conspiracy, right? We've got Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Ontario now have openly said that. No, these public health orders don't apply to our elected officials of any jurisdiction, right? These are for you plebs. These are for you, not for us. Rules for thee, not for
Not
me.
for
right?
me.
So, well,
you mentioned
hold on now, because we got the application section here. This is really important. I don't think enough people give this part credence. The application section tells you who the charter applies to. To use the charter, you have to use the enforcement section, which is section 24. And the proof is in the pudding. Words matter. To enforce the charter, the enforcement of guaranteed rights and freedoms starts off by saying anyone whose rights or freedoms as guaranteed by this charter have been infringed or denied upon, yada, 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 yada. You can seek a remedy in a competent court, which is hilarious. I don't know of a competent court in the landmass known as Canada, given they're all operating on a ship that's tied up in a harbor. But that's so that right off the bat, to enforce the charter, you have to have your rights guaranteed by the charter. And the application section guarantees the rights of certain individuals. And we know to include means to exclude the rest. So
I love your include exclude. That's another topic.
do we have, so this is what I mean when you hear people saying things like I have the right, the freedom of association, the freedom of mobility is one. That's section 6, right? Every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain, and leave, to remove, to move and take up residence, to pursue and gain livelihood. These things don't apply to you, right? This is the thing. This is an incorporation document for government and their employees. So you can literally think of them like Walmart. This is the easiest way. The Canadian government, Canada and corporate, is Walmart. So Walmart has a charter for their employees, right? I have family that work there. They have to follow that charter. They're employees of Walmart. They've contractually agreed to that. But that charter doesn't apply to me, not even when I go in and shop in their store. That charter only applies to the individuals who are operating in commerce for them, which is what our elected officials are doing. They're operating in commerce for the Queen. So the charter, well, which Queen? That
Queen.
That's an
She died in 1901, didn't she?
She did, but we're talking about two different she's now. That's an interesting conversation. Why would I don't even know how to put that. I think Amanda, that the Queen conversation deserves a live stream all on its own for us. And I think what's going to happen is, Amanda, you're going to be coming back next week for another discussion.
Yeah.
So that's the Charter of Rights. That's right there. It doesn't apply to you. There's a subject to this day, 4 decades later, holding it from even taking force legally or lawfully, whichever way you want to look at that. But either way, it applies, and it doesn't apply to you.
Well, exactly, because when you look at it and you state that, you go look at the freedom of association. Some say protest, we say educational rally, and they're given these emergency order tickets, whatever you want to call them, right? Which is basically a farce. Mm-hmm. On these people, but some of them are not educated. Some are getting educated on the actual truth, right? Well,
here's a good way to know that they understand this scam at all levels. Okay, the bylaws are written such that they're not allowed to supersede anything in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It states that in the bylaws, right? But again, they can say that so that you can think to yourself, I'm arguing against this bylaw officer who's trying to issue me this ticket, but it violates my Charter of Rights. And it says so right here in your own bylaw. So it's got to be real, right? Mm-hmm. But it applies to the guy you're talking to. He's hot, right?
And he's probably like, yeah, okay. I know I know what you're trying to tell me, but you're wrong.
It does no
Take
fun, right? Imagine if I walked into Walmart with their employee contract and found a supervisor and said, I haven't been paid yet. It says here every 2 weeks on a Thursday, I'm supposed to get auto deposit. Right? The manager would be like, get out of here. What does that even mean? Right? And that's what
Yeah.
that's what you're doing when you're exclaiming that your rights have been violated by a corporation. And to really end that thought off, Michael, you have a number. Do you
I
have
googled
that?
that number.
Well,
So-
would this be the corporation number that you're talking about?
Yeah,
Googled
and I'm going to preface this, okay? So there's a place called the United States Securities Stock Exchange Commission. The United States Securities Exchange Commission, sorry. And that is where international corporations are regulated and monitored and registered. So if you're a corporation and you're trading internationally and you happen to trade within the United States, you are going to be regulated and registered there. With that said, there's a number. Michael, are you ready?
Yes. And for anybody that hasn't, that wants to verify this, you're looking at 0000, so 4 zeros, 230098, Canada, capital letters, brackets, SIC, bracket, and 8880, and you can verify that for the corporation number.
And I just saw Janie request to put it in the chat. I'm unable to actually interact with you guys in the chat. I can only read what you're saying. So, but we can, someone else, if they have it handy, can put it in the chat if they're watching. If not, we can get it to you absolutely when we're done here.
Absolutely. So that's verifiable.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Actually, Michael, can you give me that and I'll put it in the chat for them?
there we go.
4 zeros,
4 zeros, 23
23
0, yeah, 2300,
00
not, yeah, 98,
98
Canada, capital letters,
Okay.
and then bracket, capital letters, SIC,
Okay.
8880.
3 8s
Yes, 3 8s and a 0.
and a 0 bracket. Okay.
Yeah, that's
I'll read it back to
verified. Go
So
ahead.
4 zeros, 230098, Canada capital letters, bracket, SIC capital letters, 8880, bracket.
Yeah, just a second
hold on.
bracket. Yeah.
Yeah, the bracket closes with SIC.
Oh, it closes with that and the numbers beside it?
Yeah.
Gotcha. I will get that to her. All right. Continue, guys. It's great.
So excellent. I love that we can get administrators to pop in here in real time and verify stuff.
And post it for us. Yeah.
And somebody actually just mentioned in the chat they too have looked this up. It's easy to verify. Once you're on that website, because this should have piqued your interest enough that you're going to go there and look for this now. So while you're there and you find Canada Incorporated, and you can see their financial disclosure statements as corporations need to do, you think of them as budgets that governments put out every year. They think of them as financial disclosure that corporations are required to do every year. You can also look up your province. You might find British Columbia Incorporated, Ontario Incorporated, because these are simply sub-corporations, sister corporations. I'm trying to remember. Somebody in the Ontario team said it perfectly, and I can't remember how they put it. I hope they're in the chat there to remind me. But I call them sub-corporations now, right? And even your cities that you live in, right? If you live in Toronto, that's an incorporated municipality. It's incorporated, right? And you hear these words and you don't even think about, oh, it's an incorporated. No, it's an incorporation. It's incorporated into the sister corporation of Ontario Incorporated, which is a sister corporation of Canada Incorporated, which is generally speaking, a sister corporation of the crown. And if you want to go further, you get right to the Vatican because, surprise, surprise, all roads lead to Rome.
You said it. You said it. I was going to say it, but you said it.
I know.
I'll beat you to it.
Yeah. So does that conclude like our talk about the charter for now?
Yep.
Like on that point, or do we have anything else?
No,
On
we
the
have
charter.
nothing else. I think we got it.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
and,
it keeps some people's attention. Because it's really hard to grab people. Really hard.
well, if you're hearing this now,
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sure.
absolutely you may.
Today I was listening to Rebel News, and Rebel News mentioned in there that he was being sued, okay, by the government. So he said it went against his went against his rights, his Charter of Rights, that they could sue him. So what would he be basing that on?
Well,
Because he's not really a government employee. He's media.
He's part of a corporation, though.
Yeah, he is a corporation.
yeah, but he's not a government corporation. Rebel News is a private corporation that wouldn't protect him under the application section. But so I don't like, okay, that falls under the same response that I would have to give you if you asked me about how somebody could be a constitutional lawyer in a world where we don't have a constitution or a charter, right? So
Okay, I get it. Now I understand.
he'll make the claim because he has to, right?
Yes.
That my rights have been violated, but bringing that to court, in order for him to have a successful victory, he would have to have the charter apply to him. And that's actually really interesting because remember Omar Khadr?
Yes.
He had a Charter of Rights argument, and he had a successful outcome. Now, it was a settlement, but he was making a Charter of Rights argument, and the government saw fit to settle because they assumed he would win. If he wins that case, does that mean he was a government employee?
Yep.
That's something that I've been thinking about for a long time.
And he is.
He had almost basically it was a clear-cut win case, and Trudeau figured, I'll just pay him so we don't have to go through the court and owe him way more money than we may end up. So, but
It was found out that he was working with them.
Well, there
He
you go.
He was actually employed.
Yeah.
So
Surprise.
That's how you have the charter apply to you, is you become a government employee, and then you get all those benefits of all those rights and freedom.
Well, that was my question. Anyways, thank you.
Well,
are you guys moving on to the clarity?
that's what we're getting on to right now. I was just going to clue up, make sure we got no other questions.